Coming up on this all-new episode of Focus, we showcase the people, places, and issues that matter to you. We focus on campus with a major league inspiration, the story of a special member of the Lehigh University baseball team. Then we focus on history with a memoir 70 years in the making. A Montgomery County man recalls his role as an interpreter at the Nuremberg trials following World War II. These stories and a focus on health with the newest dietary guidelines and what they may mean to your next meal. It's all coming up right now on Focus. Focus is for our community.
Focus showcases the people,
The places and the issues that matter to you.
Focus on what matters.
You never know what you're going to see when you tune into Focus.
Support for Focus is provided by Univest, Banking, Insurance, Investments, Fellowship Community, Continuing Care with Spirit, and by viewers like you. Thank you.
Thank you for joining us. I'm Laura McHugh, coming to you from PBS 39 at the PPL Public Media Center. In this episode, we'll focus on history and health, but first we focus on campus. This story takes us to Lehigh University in Bethlehem, where Focus reporter Brittany Garzillo met a 9-year-old boy making a major league impact on the university's baseball team.
Baseball players dream of getting drafted. For 9-year-old Richard Klingensmith of Center Valley, that dream came true.
This is the 2016 baseball roster for the Lehigh University baseball team. Does somebody look familiar? Who's that? Oh.
Okay, so it wasn't the major leagues, but for Richard, it was a major moment.
Oh yes, major deal, yes. Yeah, it doesn't get the salary, doesn't get the school credits, but that's fine.
See, Richard appears to be your typical camera-shy 9-year-old boy.
Richard, you want to hit a little bit?
But behind those big eyes and bright smile, he suffers from a series of health problems, including mild cerebral palsy, an autism spectrum disorder, anxiety, and seizures.
He has a high anxiety level. It can be triggered by a strange environment, people he doesn't know, large crowds, the weather. And anxiety is also a big trigger for his seizures.
Because Richard averages a few seizures a week, at all hours of the day and night, he wears a helmet.
The helmet is also his little trademark now in the Lehigh Valley.
And is usually accompanied by his service dog, a 2-year-old golden doodle named Roper, who can detect Richard's seizures by scent.
He does pre-alerts an hour to 2 hours beforehand by licking us and licking Richard.
Yet for a child who's been thrown a few curveballs in life,
here, throw it to me.
Richard found his sweet spot.
He loves to play, but his biggest passion is baseball.
What's it called?
Call it.
Yeah.
Safe.
A passion that's blossomed with help from a program offered through Lehigh University in South Bethlehem called Team Impact, a national nonprofit that pairs children with life-threatening and chronic illnesses to collegiate sports teams throughout the country.
Wow, what's it called? What's it called? Ow!
No, safe!
During a designated draft day at Lehigh University, Richard officially became part of the team in September of 2015.
We actually had him sign a letter of intent, so it's kind of a cool moment for he and his family.
Sean Leary, head coach of the Lehigh University baseball team, and his players say the decision to draft Richard was a win-win.
Richard is something of an inspiration to the Lehigh baseball team.
Despite the wins and losses, he's always there. He's always there to pick you up, and it kind of puts things in perspective for you.
It's like watching your little brother grow up. He used to be shy, he used to be quiet, he used to stand next to his parents, but he's opened up.
In ways the Klingensmiths couldn't imagine.
Before baseball, before Lehigh, you could only find him really on my lap or maybe on Aileen's lap. That's about it. You would never find him go to a stranger and sit and hug and all that stuff.
It's brought him out of his shell. It's like he has 36 more brothers that are looking out for him.
What's your favorite thing to do with them when they're finished practicing?
Batting and running the bases.
Running the bases?
Yeah. And batting.
And batting.
And batting.
But
And that's not only after practice. On this day, you could even find him rounding home base during equine therapy at Menito Life Center in Allentown.
All right, nice and easy, my friend.
Woo! The question remains if Richard will commit to the team until his graduation, as outlined in the program. For Richard's dad, however, there's a more important question.
Now, I got a question for you.
what?
Do you have an easy life right now, or do you think you have a hard life right now?
Easy life.
Easy life?
Yes.
That's my number one goal right there.
For Richard's biggest fan, that's something worth celebrating. For Focus, I'm Brittany Garzillo, reporting.
Thank you, Brittany. We now turn our focus to history. 70 years ago this year, the Nuremberg trials convicted top Nazi leaders for the murder of an estimated 11 million people in Nazi death camps and millions more in their war of aggression. One Montgomery County man bore witness to history in 1946 and shared his memories with Focus reporter Grover Silcox. Grover?
Thanks, Laura. George Sackheim served as an interpreter for American prosecutors during the trials and heard the accused Nazi officials try to explain away their responsibility for these atrocities. Today, George serves as a witness to history. The Allied powers rejoiced when Nazi Germany surrendered in May of 1945. That ended the war. But the question of accountability remained. Who would be responsible for the Nazi atrocities committed during the war? That question was answered several months later at the historic Nuremberg war crimes trials in Nuremberg, Germany.
In a packed courtroom in Nuremberg, the first session of the true trial of the century was opened.
92-year-old Dr. George Sackheim, a retired psychologist, speaks often about his role as an interpreter at the historic Nuremberg trials, which began on November 20th, 1945.
During the ensuing 9 or 10 months, 23 former Reich government ministers and high officials stood trial. They were tried before a panel of judges from the United States, Great Britain, France, and Russia, 2 from each country.
George, who was born in Germany to Reform Jewish parents, came to America in 1938 and was fluent in German and English. He had served as an intelligence specialist with the U.S. infantry through the war in Europe. Now, at 22 years old, he was about to come face to face with some of the men who started the war he just finished fighting.
I was the interpreter for Hermann Goering on one occasion, April 6, 1945.
Goering, once second in command to Adolf Hitler, created the much-feared Gestapo secret police and commanded the German Air Force. George had kept a diary of his interrogation sessions and shares a passage in which he quotes Goering.
This is my direct translation, and I quote, "I told him, Hitler, time and time again, that we must destroy the English war industry instead of wasting our bombs by dropping them on that stupid London. What good will it do us if a few hundred more houses would go up in flames," says Goering to Hitler. And Hitler didn't agree with that. He said he wanted him to continue bombing London.
George acquired photos of the Nuremberg courtroom from a Russian photographer on a newspaper assignment. A couple of the photos show Goering's disdain for the whole proceedings.
Goering said he had no remorse, not an iota of remorse for anything he did or he ordered others to do. When he was first captured, he said to the general who met him, Oh, war is like a football game. The loser shakes hands with the winner, and then all is forgiven.
In the early 1930s, George and his mother fled from Germany to Palestine before the Nazis took over completely.
She listened to some of Hitler's speeches, and they were devastating. I mean, everything, all of Germany's misfortunes were due to the Jews. Well, my mother was an intelligent lady, and she said that man means business, and he's not going to stop until his program is realized. She said, we're not staying here.
Six years after arriving in Palestine, George's mother learned she had cancer and sent George to live with relatives in the U.S.
She probably knew we weren't going to see each other again. I think it was very courageous of her to do that when you're so sick.
George assimilated quickly in America. In 1942, he began studies at Columbia University, but soon after was drafted into the Army. He trained as an intelligence specialist and served with the 104th Infantry Division as U.S. forces swept the Germans from the Normandy beaches to Berlin. In Germany, his unit liberated the Nazi death camp at Nordhausen. There, George saw the unspeakable.
Some survived, but some of them just wanted to see the liberation, and then they died. They were exhausted. They looked like they weighed 60 or 70 pounds.
If George had wondered what kind of people could do this, he'd get his answer at the Nuremberg trials as an interpreter for Rudolf Haas, the ruthless commandant of the death camp at Auschwitz in Poland.
He confessed that during his tour of duty as commandant, the first time he said 3 million Jews were killed, exterminated. But then when we brought up these papers the next time for him to sign, he said, no, I didn't say 3 million, I said 2.5 million. The other 500,000 died from disease, starvation, and epidemics, and illnesses.
George also served as a courtroom monitor, seated just below the top tier of judges. The monitor's job was to clarify a given interpretation during the proceedings.
If one of the defense lawyers felt that what his client said was not interpreted correctly, Chief Justice Lawrence, he'd call a halt to the proceedings until everybody was satisfied that translation was accurate.
George left the trials on May 1st, 1946, to finish college. 5 months later, the tribunal handed down its verdict.
There were 12 defendants had been sentenced to death, but 11 were actually executed, and the others got long prison sentences.
Only one defendant scheduled for execution cheated the hangman, and that was Hermann Goering.
A couple of hours before his execution, he took a cyanide pill and killed himself.
But the truth prevailed, and so did George Sackheim. He earned a PhD and enjoyed a long career as a psychologist. He and his wife of 66 years, Ilse, who escaped Nazi death camps in Poland, were recently invited to attend the 70th anniversary memoriam in Nuremberg, Germany, by Dr. John Barrett, an expert on the Nuremberg trials. George believes the Nuremberg trials are as important today as they were 70 years ago.
I had a tremendous feeling of triumph, that good won out over evil, that these men were all brought to account.
And that the impact of these trials continues for generations to come. For Focus, I'm Grover Silcox reporting.
Thank you, Grover. We now turn the focus to health. New government guidelines recommend changes in the amounts of sugar, sodium, caffeine, and cholesterol that we consume. To learn more, Grover and I are now joined by registered dietitian Dorothy McFadden from St. Luke's University Health Network's Weight Management Center. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
So we broke down into 4 main categories that made up the bulk of the major changes people will consume. Let's jump right in and learn about what's changed in the area of cholesterol.
Okay, so some of the significant changes from the guidelines that came out 5 years ago are that there's no recommendation for cholesterol. For years, you've been saying 300 milligrams of cholesterol or less per day, and now we've learned that actually saturated and trans fat has more of an effect on your bad cholesterol or LDL cholesterol. So you can have eggs now without guilt. You can also have shrimp now without guilt.
So that's a big change.
Yes, it is.
A lot of people stayed away from eggs, especially the yolks in eggs, for many, many years.
And the yolks are actually a wonderful source of nutrition. For 60 calories, you get vitamin D. A lot of people are low in vitamin D nowadays, and there's very few dietary sources of it. You get vitamin A. You get all your essential fatty acids, and the whites give you all your essential amino acids. So really, for a small amount of calories, you're getting a lot of nutrition.
Now, how will that impact, we have here margarine and butter?
Well, the guideline is 10% of your calories or less for saturated fats or trans fats. Trans fats are vegetable oils that have been chemically altered to be solid at room temperature. And over the years, it's been learned that these saturated fats really increase the LDL or bad cholesterol that leads to heart disease. So you really need to limit those things.
And what about, this is olive oil, but I know it's going to make an impact on olive oil, canola oils, and a number of oils that we're going to eat.
That's correct. You know, you may have heard about the Mediterranean diet and all the olive oil. It's a monounsaturated oil, a liquid oil, and it really does not affect your LDL cholesterol. In fact, it's beneficial for you. And we find that people who follow the Mediterranean diet can eat higher levels of fat and still be really healthy.
Well, this is good news for egg lovers.
Yes.
And bad news for butter lovers. Our next station talks about caffeine. And I think for coffee lovers, which both Grover and I fall into those categories, this is good news.
Yeah, tell us this is good news.
Well, you can have your coffee without guilt, as long as you're not loading it up with whipped cream and flavored syrups. And
it's all the accessories.
Exactly. It's not like your milkshake of the day, but you can have up to 400 milligrams of caffeine safely. It's not tied to any risk in disease. So you can have up to 3 cups of coffee a day, depending on how strong you make your coffee. And it's not 3 24-ounce cups, it's 3 8-ounce cups. So if you have one large or tall at Starbucks, you know, that's usually about 16 ounces or 2 cups. So you have to think about what we're talking about as far as ounces.
So about how many ounces would this be? Is this a 12 ounce?
That looks like that's 16.
Okay.
So you could have one more 8-ounce cup of this.
Okay.
Yeah, it doesn't say on it, but that looks like it's 16 ounces.
Okay.
Many of your mugs are 12 ounces. So you have to keep that in mind. So you could do 2 mugs of coffee and stay within that 400 milligrams of caffeine.
Right. I'm always amazed at how little a cup is.
Yeah.
When you're used to these other, containers, the ones that you get at the store, or at restaurants, or even at home, far more than what an actual cup is. But you can get used to it.
Definitely.
You get used to the other way. You can get used to a healthier amount.
So you can have your cup of Joe in the morning without any guilt. I know I like to have my cup in the morning to get me going.
And now I can have that third cup around 3 o'clock, 2:30, 3 o'clock when I need that extra jolt. So one of the other areas, speaking of jolt, is the area of sugar. And I know we set out milk, chocolate milk, and fruit because there are some significant changes in how we're supposed to be eating sugar now. What are the new guidelines?
Well, the new guidelines have actually set a recommendation for added sugar. And what that means is sugars that are added to foods. You know, a lot of foods that you don't expect to have sugar in them are put in there. You'll see it in tomato sauce and salad dressings, things like that. Natural sugars don't have the same effect, and there is a separation between the two. So when you have an apple or an orange, you're getting all these other nutrients with that. You're getting vitamin C, you're getting soluble fiber, so that is different than the sugar that's an added sugar. So for instance, if you have a glass of low-fat milk here, there's going to be 12 grams of sugar in there in the form of lactose, which is milk sugar. But if you're going to have the chocolate milk, you could have 24 to 30 grams of sugar in there because there's added sugar in that product that you don't need. You're not getting really any nutrition from that added sugar. The average American eats about 3 to 4 times the amount of sugar than they really need. And you know, it's something that we need to start paying attention to. And this is going to roll into the new labeling guidelines that are going to come out in 2018, where you'll be able to see that on the label. There won't be just one general number. You'll be able to see how much added sugar is in the products that you purchase.
And sugar's really addictive, isn't it?
Oh, more and more research is showing that it affects that part of your brain. And you want more and more, with any kind of addictive substance, you want more of it to get the same kind of hit. Right. So once you have some sugar, you always are going to want to have some more.
Right. Interesting with the white milk, you know, you don't think of it as having sugar,
Right.
but it actually is in the form of lactose.
Yeah, and I have a lot of people who avoid milk because of that reason, and I have to
Mhm.
explain to them, you're getting vitamin D, vitamin A, phosphorus, potassium, and that's one of the things the guidelines emphasizes is nutrient-dense foods. If you're going to nourish your body, you want to give it nutrients it needs. So if you're going to have low-fat milk's about 80 calories, and you get a ton of nutrients for that 80 calories.
Right. A lot of folks will opt, they think the juices are healthy as opposed to the, you know, they might
Right.
not even consider the solid fruits. And yet that could be a real problem with sugar.
That
right?
is a real problem. I mean, the guidelines do accept 100% fruit juice, but I always feel eating the fruit is better. You get more fullness from it, and it's less calorically dense when you have the whole food.
Well, before we run out of time, I do want to talk about sodium, and we have here some common culprits of sodium. But before we get to those, share with us how the guidelines are changes specifically for people aged 50 or older.
Right. When the guidelines came out 5 years ago, they set up a guideline for if you were over the age of 50, you had to limit your sodium intake to 1,500 milligrams or less. Well, anybody who tracks their sodium intake, that is a big challenge, and I found that very difficult to stay within that guideline. Well, they've gotten rid of that now, and they say in certain instances, if you have a certain disease that your physician wants you to be low sodium, then yes, you should go to that level. Otherwise, it's 2,300 milligrams of sodium per day. And the average American does 3,500 to 4,000 milligrams a day of sodium. So we have these items out here to show you that they are much higher in salt than what you need. Canned soups are a common culprit. A lot of your tomato products, you'd be surprised, a lot of breads have sodium in them. You can see it if you have a sandwich between the cured meats and the bread and the cheese, you could be over your allowance for that particular meal.
So that's good news for people who are age 50 or older.
Oh, yeah.
They now have 800 more milligrams to work with on a daily basis.
Much more reasonable.
Now, Dorothy, you had mentioned to us that one of the most important aspects of the new guidelines is that they're calling for supportive environments toward healthy eating patterns for everyone. Explain to us what they mean by that.
I think that's a really important guideline because we can't do this on our own. We've all discovered as individuals it's very difficult to follow a healthy diet. And what we want is to support one another, to work in environments that are very supportive, whether you're at work and they allow you to go for a quick walk during your lunch break, or if you have a gathering at work, the people bring in healthy foods. I mean, we have to support one another. Just like when they change attitudes about smoking, I think we need to start changing attitudes about these work environments. You know, having the candy dish on the desk, is that really necessary? Because it's hard to do it alone, you know?
Right. Well, I have to say I lost a few pounds.
Yes.
In 6-7 months, and I had a lot of support here at PBS 39 with my compadres.
And I'll tell you, it made all of us want to eat better. When we would go out for lunch and to see the healthy choices that you are making, it inspired all of us to make healthier choices, whether we had weight goals or just healthy lifestyle goals in mind.
And that's a very good point. People always associate eating healthier with weight loss, and that's not what it's about. It's about feeling good and feeling the way your body should be fueled. You feel better when you eat better. So even if you set the first step of, I'm just going to eat healthier, that's a tremendous benefit.
Right. Yeah, it doesn't have to be a drag.
Right.
It actually becomes fun. I used to say I don't lose weight because I suffer from I don't give a hootitis. So I got cured of that.
Yeah.
And almost hoodwinked myself into a little competition that we had here within the station. And maybe that competitiveness helped me, you know, motivate me to do it. And, you know, slowly but surely the pounds are coming off. You know, it's like 3 pounds on, 4 pounds off. You know, it's always one more off within a, 48-hour period, a week period. And you get more motivated the more you do it, and the more success you see. And then you feel like you have some control over your life, and you just feel better. And the energy level is incredible. With each, 5 pounds, 10 pounds, I ultimately got to 30. And so the energy level is incredible. And it almost takes you by surprise. You're doing things that you hadn't done in a long time and going further, your endurance is better. And suddenly you're saying to yourself, wait a minute, I'm doing things I haven't done in ages. Yeah. And you realize it's attributed to the weight.
Well, you've been an inspiration to us all, and so have you, Dorothy. Thanks for helping us understand the new guidelines in the new year.
You're welcome.
Well, and thank you for joining us. Next week starts a new month, which means we'll start with art. We'll see you then. Until then, remember to focus on what matters.